Hello, our truth warriors, and welcome back to another gripping episode of the Atlantic Underground podcast. Today's guest is returning to us from the UK and is effectively speaking on behalf of the dead. No, he's not a spiritual medium, he's a funeral director of 18 years, and what he sees speaks volumes. Now, if you've not yet seen our last interview with John, I'm going to go and place that link into the show notes. So please take a look at that. That was a really good interview last time. But, let's just try and get back up to speed and see what's going on. And certainly in the world of Mr. John O'Looney. Hello, John. Welcome back to the
Hello.
Atlantic Underground.
No,
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I've been busy. I'm tired. But it's yeah, I'm all good. It's just saddened by what's unfolding around us. But I'm kind of drawing comfort now because at last the masses are starting to see it now. Unfortunately, it's as and when they lose someone usually, but they're starting to see it now. They're starting to see, perhaps MPs who were sitting up on the fence are now coming down on the right side. And I'm very hopeful that we'll bring these criminals to task. We'll see.
Yeah, let's hope so. Now, John, I realise how difficult it has been to speak out against these official narratives.
Yeah.
How's it been since you first spoke out about what you were seeing?
Well, to be honest with you, it's interesting that you say it's difficult to speak out. It hasn't been difficult for me to speak out because I've got a moral compass and I won't be complicit or silent as young people are dying around us after being poisoned. These people behind this knew what was going to happen. They were told back in September of 2021. And I've talked about the meeting I had with Sir Graham Brady, and he was told, he was not only told by myself, but told by people far cleverer than me, far more qualified than me, and reams of evidence was given to him. He was told what was going to happen, who was going to die, how they were going to die, the mechanics behind that, what they were going to die from, and as a result of what. And it was these gene therapies. They're not vaccines. I think people, it's a tough thing because in order to be honest, you have to be honest. That's the bottom line. You can be honest and be gently honest, but what way is there of telling people gently you've been poisoned? and,
Yeah,
and potentially your life is going to end prematurely, or certainly, there's a strong risk of that. It's really quite upsetting, and different people react differently, don't they, to being frightened, and it is a frightening time. So frightening for me, being on the outside, not being vaccinated, that I'm aware of,
yeah.
looking in at these poor people that have believed the lie. I dread to think, how would they feel 4 or 5 jabs in? I can only imagine. I can
Oh
only
yeah, I
imagine.
mean they become just ticking time bombs. I mean
Well,
most
I
death.
think what you find is they're going to have the conviction of a Japanese soldier now,
Yeah,
on a Pacific island in the 1960s, aren't they? 15 years after the war's ended,
yeah,
where they're fully, the terror, the sheer terror. And I see it in here. If I have people come in here and they've lost a loved one, some of them laugh and joke through an arrangement.
yeah,
Some of them have rolled on the floor just there, crying their heart out, and everything in between. There's a broad spectrum of different reactions to grief. Fear is very much the same. It's another emotion that we've all experienced at some point in our lives. People react differently. Some people, like me, will front it head on and speak their mind, and they're
yeah,
not frightened of the consequences because I understand what's going on, and it's bigger than me. I'm not important in the grand scheme of things. Other people will run away. Some people will bury their heads, and so we're seeing different reactions from different people. Um, it's very interesting watching the doctors and the politicians now, because as this unfolds and as it becomes apparent exactly what's happened, they're suddenly realizing what the future holds for them as well. I think,
yeah,
they've these people have played on the basic principle of greed. Everyone is greedy. We
yeah,
all want that, but we've been kind of funneled down that pathway of consumerism, where you want that next iPhone, you want that next iPad, you want that 4x4, you want that Porsche, you want that bigger house, and of course, when these carrots have been dangled and people have been earning phenomenal sums of money for supporting this lie, this narrative, they've took it. Well,
yeah,
how long do you keep a secret for before you're then complicit in the crime?
yeah,
Is it is
absolutely.
it is it a week? Is it a month? Do you say nothing for 6 months and still get away with it? At what point, So the longer these people stay silent, the closer the turmoil is to come in, and I can say that turmoil is going to come. That
Yeah.
civil unrest is going to come. I suspect not long after the WHO are ushered in the end of May, and it's going to unfold. Who are these people going to vent their fury at? It'll be the doctors, the ones that are most accessible, the
Yeah.
ones that could have stopped it and chose not to because they've took the money.
Yeah.
You know, so my conscience is clear. I'm really not frightened now. I've had 3 years of seeing it to get my head around it and what's coming. I know what's coming.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Now, most deaths are being categorized in the usual suspects like cancers, heart attacks, and strokes, etc.
Mm.
But on the face of things, this may very well be the issue that killed them, but it's not the cause, is it?
No, no. And when I've questioned coroners, certainly the chief coroner of England, that I was basically told they follow government policy. That's it. You
I
know,
mean,
so
what is the government policy? What's the government saying that
well,
the
basically
doctors?
you have to look at the role of a coroner. So the role of a coroner is determine the case, the cause of death in an individual. Um, thrombosis being one of those causes of death. Now, thrombosis is an umbrella term. It
Yeah,
could be a traditional blood clot. It could be a blockage. It could be a piece of wood from an accident that's blocked an artery, a jelly bean. They all come under the umbrella term thrombosis. They don't go into detail of what the makeup of that thrombosis is. What is it? It's just a blockage or thrombosis.
yeah,
That is government policy. So these people are very careful to be seen to be doing everything above board and as it should be done following government policy. And the mistake that we made as a society is allowing general practice, for example, to become such a lucrative, well-paid industry. And that basically these guys are pimps and salesmen for big pharma.
yeah, yeah. That's it.
That's all they are. I've sat in the doctors in the past and watched doctors Google my symptoms in front of me. Do you know? Yeah, exactly that. So then they'll look at your medical history and they'll prescribe you certain things, and you get prescribed. I mean, they get paid certain amounts of money for prescribing certain things, and they get bonuses if they prescribe certain things. So they encourage antidepressants, for example. There are certain antidepressants they're encouraged to prescribe, and I've spoke to many doctors that have talked quite in depth about that. Remdesivir, for example,
Yeah,
hospitals purchase pharmaceuticals from big pharma, and they were offered significant discounts on those purchases if they took remdesivir. So that's why they took it. They were encouraged and they were coerced, and they took it and they've used it. It is what it is. It's kind of like an open secret, and it's interesting because I had a guy in. I've had 70, 80 odd undertakers reach out to me. Some of them have been very open. Some of them a little bit. They'll withdraw a number, but they'll just happy to have a phone call. Others, I had a guy drop off, a guy I used for repats, who so repatriation. If I get someone, for example, dying Dorset, and I'm in Milton Keynes, and I can't go out for the day to Dorset because I have things to do here, I would subcontract to him. He would collect the deceased, convey that deceased to me, and so on and so forth. And I was talking to him quite in depth, and it was the same conversation. Are you busy? Yes. Are we seeing loads of young people? Yes, we've seen it as well. And they all know. They all know. But like he said, they're pulling the ladders up.
yeah,
So, they're all frightened. They're all frightened. Of course, they're frightened. It's a frightening thing, isn't it? When you've got your own
oh yeah,
government. You just said to me 5 years ago, our own government's going to try and kill us off. I'd have laughed at you, called you a nutter, and I'd have hung up. Not
yeah,
now. I see it clearly. I've sat there in Westminster with these scumbags, as
yeah.
they've openly admitted. Oh, it's above my pay grade.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it's funny you mentioned Google before. I mean, we've interviewed lots of real top level doctors, and
Mm.
a lot of people within the health environment. And I'll get into conversation with people. It may be something we'll post up online. And when you're saying about the doctor Googling the symptoms, the amount
Mm.
of people that will criticize myself and say, "Oh, where did you get your medical degree from?"
Yeah, yeah.
Google.
Yeah, yeah, the irony, the irony. It's very funny. I remember around about 18 years ago when I first started doing this job, and I was kind of weighing it up and sussing it up. And when I started, I was under the impression that ministers, vicars, priests, and doctors were amongst the most wonderful, caring, and intelligent people. And nothing is farther from the truth. Don't get me wrong. I know ministers and priests and doctors. Some of them are wonderful. They are really genuinely good souls, but some of them are amongst the most mercenary and disgusting people I've ever come across.
Oh yeah.
And these are the people that are still sticking these needling arms. They won't do it to their own kids, but they do it to yours, because that's government policy.
Yeah, I'll never forget when I lived back in England. There was a guy we knew, and his job was to. It was called mileage alteration. To me and you, it was clocking cars. Now, we bumped into him one day. He says, "You'll never guess where I've just been." So I don't know what you've been doing. He says, "I've just come from the church up the road." He said, and the local minister at the church wanted me to alter the mileage on his car because he was selling it.
Yeah, men
So,
of God, men of God. Do you know,
yeah,
I can remember during the pandemic having a devout Catholic family come in, and they'd lost someone from what they were told was COVID, and it was a sealed coffin. And I couldn't get a priest to come out and bless a sealed coffin.
yeah.
These are men of God.
Hmm.
You know, they're not men of God at all. They're just along for the ride, taking advantage of people. You know, and what
Yeah.
it's taught me is that you don't have to attend church to be respectful of
No,
God. You
no.
know, there are people that see it as just a gateway to exploit people. In the same way, you get a paedophile targets a nursery nurse job because it puts them in the right position they want to be to exert that power over people, abuse that trust. Vicars and priests are just the same. Not all of them by any means. You know, there are some wonderful. I know some wonderful priests and vicars and ministers, but I know some people that are monsters.
Yeah.
Um, their time is coming. Their time
Yeah.
is coming.
But you look at today's generation, John, and I see it as well as you see it. You know, we popped back to England to see family in December. It's been 10 years since we've been in the UK, and I was absolutely horrified at what
Yeah,
I've seen. And the way myself and you were brought up, there was moral values,
yeah, of
there,
course.
there
Yeah.
was respect, there was understanding. And to a certain degree, and probably a very high percentage, I don't think that exists anymore within the generations that are there.
No. Well, they've kind of done a number of things. It's been a very crafty, been very well. You have to applaud the genius, really. They've done it from day one. I mean, there are key moments, aren't there? Like the criminalizing of child discipline, for example. What that's done now is now have a generation of children who know no boundaries,
Yeah,
and they'll kill you, they'll stab you to death for a dirty look, a perceived dirty look, or a mobile phone, or a nice pair of trainers. Do you know?
yeah,
Or if you're in the wrong area of London, and that is because they've had no boundaries in their life. You know, when I was a kid, if I stepped out of line and was warned, and I stepped out of line again, oh, I got smacked ass,
yeah,
or a ring an ear roll, and the thought of a policeman taking me home,
yeah.
oh dear, do you know what? My old man would have looked at me. That would have been my lot. Is that abuse? I don't know. I think it kind of, you
No.
can only really look back and reflect on things and look at yourself. Am I a well-balanced individual? Yes, I've never ever signed on in my life ever. I've been blessed with good health, so I've been able to work. So you know, I kind of get that with people that are not, you know, long-term illness, for example, and can't work. But I've always worked. I've never ever been convicted of any dishonesty. You know, so I
Yeah,
don't think really having boundaries and having discipline in my life has been done me any bad at all. I think it's been only good. It should be done with moderation, you know, as in all things. I'm not saying beat your child after death or beat your child unconscious, but I certainly would have no qualms about smacking my boy's ass if he
oh yeah,
steps out of line. And then if you look in nature, do you know when you've got bears in a cave? If one of them strays too far, his mum will bring it in and cuff it on the ear roll. That is part of the being nurtured, the protected process, and the being brought up process. Again, it's moderation. I'm not saying abuse someone, but you are inadvertently abusing them by not installing those boundaries, because we're, like I say, we're raising kids that are utterly feral. You know, look how
yeah, yeah.
kids behave now. You know,
Oh yeah, it's
uh, um,
unbelievable.
yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah,
It is actually unbelievable. I look now. I mean, I can remember a key time for me when I cast my mind back, and I'm 56, right? I remember Frankie Goes to Hollywood, and they brought out a song called Relax,
yeah,
and there was uproar. You know, they wouldn't play it on the stations. The lyrics are explicit. There was uproar back when the BBC had some morals left. you know. Now we've had telly programs where people are stripping off and showing you their vagina and their penis
Oh yeah,
on mainstream TV.
yeah.
Do you know Naked Attraction? To me, that is actually disgusting, pornographic, and satanic. What
And,
kind of example does that set our children? You know, that's why we've got girls walking around with nothing on.
yeah, and the double
Yeah, yeah,
standards
yeah,
are
yeah. Of
incredible
course.
because like I remember when we were in Canada, we were in Canada for 10 years, and baby,
Totally lost. Canada's lost.
it's that's why we were out of there. That's a whole other conversation now. But like I remember, you know, the Christmas songs, they banned "Baby It's Cold Outside" because they said it was derogatory to women. Whilst I think I can't remember the artist's name, but the number one song in the chart was "Wet Ass Pussy," and it's just the double standards is
Yeah,
unbelievable.
of
But like,
course. If
but but like you were
look,
saying before as well, unfortunately, society now has given its power away to authority. And I remember the kids coming home from school and, oh, this week is anti-bullying week. And I just say to the kids, oh, listen, if somebody picks on you, smack them right in the nose. I
yeah,
said, and if you get
exactly
into
that.
trouble, I said, I'll come up to the school. I said, and I'll deal with whatever the fallout is. And they're like, oh
100%.
no, we can't do that. We can't do that. We'll get into trouble. You won't get into
Don't worry
trouble.
about it. No, no, you won't. I always say to my boy, you know, don't throw the first punch, but make sure you throw the last one. You know, and
Yeah.
I stand by him, and I know he's a well-balanced kid, and he don't get into trouble. He's in the top 2% of everything.
Yeah.
You know, so for me, I remember they were doing this. They've been doing this brainwashing with kids. They do this color run. So in this color run, they throw colored powders all over the kids.
Yeah.
And my boy has asthma, so I said to him, no, he's not taking part. I said there's two reasons. Number one, as I said, I don't agree with the rainbow transgendery twisted ideology, and number two, he's got asthma. And there have been, and I linked half a dozen reports of it being dangerous and threw it into the school. You know, these people, they have to tick boxes for Ofsted to get the money they need. It's
Yes.
not, they're not interested in kids at all. You know, I remember when he first started the school, he's year 8 now, but when he was year 7, he started there. And I know they've got a vaccination nurse there, and I know they poison the kids in there with these vaccines. So I emailed them, said to them, listen, my name's John, my son is about to start. I understand you have a vaccination nurse there and a policy there. I'm an undertaker. I work locally. I've seen lots of injuries and deaths as a result of vaccination. You do not touch my child. This email is me withdrawing my consent for you to do that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I didn't get a reply. I didn't expect a reply. I kind of hoped that they'd be stupid. They're not. What they do is they ring up 3 or 4 days later, and it was a girl called Sarah. And I'm going to identify the school. It's Hazley School in Milton Keynes. So
Yeah.
that's the school my son goes to. So she said, hi, my name's Sarah. I'm the immunization nurse, and I'm just ringing you up, Mr. O'Looney, about your son and the email you sent about his immunization, and just wanted to have a chat. So I told her, and I said, look, I've seen loads of people that have come in, especially after the COVID jabs, and they've died. I said that we're seeing unnatural blood clots inside people, and I don't want my child touched. And I thought she'd be horrified and shocked. She openly admits, she said, yes, I know the risks. Yeah, you know when you're like, what?
I know
So,
the
so,
risk.
so I kind of gathered my thoughts, and I said, okay. I said, so Sarah, tell me. I said, have you got children? You said, oh yes, I've got 2 children. I think she said they were 8 and 10. I said,
Yeah.
okay. I said, would you vaccinate your kids? She said, oh no. I said, okay. I said, well, can we just go over what you've said? You know the risks of vaccination. You've got 2 kids that you won't vaccinate, but you'll jab mine. Oh well, I have to. It's my job. You know when you're like these people, you're
You
insane.
have to.
It's her job. Yeah, she has
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
You know,
It's-
fucking insane. And it was, oh well, I think we've exhausted this conversation, Mr. O'Looney. And I said, well, just remember what I've said, because I will hold you personally accountable. That was it. And do you know what? My kid, he's not stupid. The apple don't fall far from the tree. I furnished him with the truth. He won't be having anything. No nasal sprays, no HPV, nothing. You know, HPV. What a ridiculous thing. When have you
I
ever
know.
seen a boy with a cervix?
I know it's
You know,
ridiculous.
yeah, they're giving it to kids now. I could tell you a horror story about the HPV. So I know one of the girls who was involved in development of the HPV, right? Professor Dolores Cale. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we've had Dolores on the show. Yeah.
Yes, she is an angel. She's lovely. She told me a story. So I said to her, "How did you fall out of government?" So the way she fell out, as she was developing this vaccine, she noted that whilst it would offer some protection against cancer, minuscule amount, cervical cancer, it would compromise the integrity of a woman's cervix, right? So that when the baby, they'd still get pregnant, but as the baby grew and the weight bore down second, third trimester, that cervix would rupture, it would fail, they would lose the child because it would be born too early. So
Right.
she went to her bosses and said, "Look, I'm really concerned. These are the reasons why." And they went, "Yeah." So she's not an unintelligent woman. She's a good soul. She
Yeah.
didn't want to argue. She went away, and rather than be part of a problem, she tweaked the vaccine so it offered significantly more protection against cancer and didn't damage the cervix, and went back to her bosses and they fucked her off
No.
straight away, got rid of her. Yeah, so it's been going on for a long time, you know.
Yeah.
And this leads on to when I was working for the co-op. I did 10 years with the co-op funeral care, and we had I used to go on what was called the baby run, for want of a better term, and that involved me going to John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford once a month, and I used to pick up between 1 and 4 babies, and they used to send me because they knew I would do the job. I wouldn't hang about. I'd go there, I'd come back. Where some of these guys, you know, they go and sit in a van for an hour and say, "Oh, it was really busy," and sit on
Yes.
a mobile phone. I would go, I would do the job, I would come back. I could, these babies were between 4 months and six and a half months gestation, perfectly formed little humans, nails, fingers, lips, nose, perfect, but just smaller. And it was obvious why they died, because their lungs hadn't matured,
Yeah.
you know, and yet loads of them had full postmortems. Why have they got full postmortems? Because they harvest the children.
Yeah.
That's what they do. So the HPV was actually developed to meet the demand for deceased babies by big pharma. So a baby, I'm told, is worth between 14 and $40,000
Yeah.
to big pharma, and they develop drugs with the organs, the liver organs, the lungs. They develop drugs around them, but they couldn't get enough for the demand. So that's what the HPV vaccine is for, and it was touted as cervical cancer jab, wasn't it? Now I've yet to see a boy with a cervix. They're
Yeah.
now trying to throw it in 12-year-old boys as well. So for anyone listening out there, do not let them put any jab whatsoever inside your child. And I'm an undertaker, and yeah, they say, "Oh, it keeps you busy." It don't keep me busy. I will tell you, I've got my own child. He will never be having another vaccine as
Yeah.
long as I have breath in me. So I stand by what I say, you know. And I can give you dozens and dozens of examples of conversations I've had, just like the one with Dolores Cahill. So
Yeah, absolutely. Now, last time we spoke, we looked at a substance that looked like long strings of overcooked pasta. You know,
yes.
this was a problem for your embalmers due to the blockages that it was causing. Has
Yeah.
this increased or decreased? And is
I,
the
so interesting. So for me, it's decreased, and I believe for 2 reasons. They're actively removing it from deceased. They release to me. I know that. I've you get to know the level of pathology that's done on a post-mortem, signature pathology, I call it, where I could even tell you at one point who did the post-mortem out of the 3 techs or 4 techs they've got, because they
yeah,
all had slightly different styles. Forensic pathology, where you would have a murder victim looked at, for example, it's a lot more in depth. So to put it bluntly, 6 cuts would be 12 cuts because they're looking that bit deeper.
yeah,
Yeah. And more incisions have been made. One of the questions that the coroner will ask a family who've lost someone is, "Who's your chosen funeral director?" And I've got a good suspicion that deceased that are released to me are cleaned out. The evidence is cleaned out. Other hospitals have a different tactic where what they do is they hold on to a deceased until they're rotten. And they know then that I can't embalm them. I can't do anything with them, so I'm not going to look at them.
yeah.
I won't name the hospitals, but there's one in particular, not too far, that is doing exactly that. The last 3, 4, 5 deceased we've had have all been unviewable, sadly.
Geez, that's insane. But I mean,
That's what they've got to do. They've got to hide it,
yeah,
because they know that if I pick up a deceased and I'm embalming them and they're full of unnatural white blood clots, I will shout about it, and they don't want that, so they do what they can to hide it.
yeah. And but I mean, do the people doing this and obviously trying to hide the evidence, especially if they know it's you that's going to be doing
They've banned me. So they've banned me from my local hospital. Only my colleague can go down there. I can't go down there because they don't like what I've said.
Yeah.
That's
But
the only reason. They don't like what I've said, so I can't attend the hospital.
yeah.
They won't have an open debate with me about it. I've offered to take samples down there and show them. They don't want to talk about it. You're banned from the hospital. Oh, right.
But
You
you
know,
speak to other funeral directors in the area.
yeah. It's commonly known. They all know. They all know.
That's crazy. Recently, I believe you had a young gentleman come in and you pulled something out of the femoral artery.
Yeah, so this was, I mean, the first one was back in 2021, about halfway through. I had a 30-year-old lad in, and he'd died suddenly. His family wanted us to embalm him because he had a big social circle, as you do when you're 30, and a lot of people loved him and wanted to see him, you know. So we embalmed him. He'd had a full post-mortem, and we opened him up. And I'll explain the way that works. So there are two types of death. There's an expected death and there's a sudden death. Yeah, so an expected death is a cancer patient, for example, who's been diagnosed and they've died over a number of months, although that's just weeks now suddenly. But they're expected, so there's no need for a post-mortem. Now, with a post-mortem case, what it is say, for example, a guy drops down dead in the street and he's 30. The post-mortem process involves cutting them up the middle, usually from about the collar line to just above the groin, and they open them up, they cut the sternum out, they remove all the organs. The organs are looked at. They take blocks and slides to inspect them under microscopes and do the various tests they do to try and ascertain the cause of death. When they're finished, they put those organs into a bag, and the bag is put back in the cavity, usually with the brain as well, and they're sewn up and then released to us as funeral directors. Now, with those two types of deaths, there are two types of embalmings. With a straight case on an expected death, we hook up an embalming pump to the carotid artery, or the carotid artery, however it's pronounced, the proper pronunciation, and we pump formaldehyde around the body. We then turn the pump round and it flushes the face. The liquid is predominantly formaldehyde. It's pink in color, so it preserves the body. It puts color back in people, the pink. You know, now obviously with someone that's had a post-mortem, you can't do that because their circulatory system that we use in what we call a straight case, an unviolated case, has been all chopped about, because when you cut the liver out, the main arteries and veins that feed that and supply that are cut. So you have to open them up, spread the cavity, take the bag of organs out, and then manually target the individual cut arteries. And you can see them, like the femoral artery that runs up the leg. You can see it at the top of the leg inside the cavity, and it's like cut straws. You know, now some people have an artery as big as my little finger. Other people have an artery as thinner, like a pen. They both do the same job. Obviously, one would have a bit lower blood pressure, I guess, than the other one, but there's a broad spectrum of artery size, is what I mean. Now, this particular young lad, when we went to put the nozzle from the pump into his femoral artery, we couldn't physically get it in because it was entirely blocked with an obstruction. So he would get the tweezers and he would go to remove that obstruction to be able to get the nozzle in into the artery, and he pulled and pulled and pulled and pulled, and a clot came out in one piece the entire length of this young man's leg. And that isn't normal. Now, when you first bring it out, it looks like a regular clot, but it's clearly very tougher, because you can go like that with it and it will bounce about like calamari, the same sort of consistency. And then when we put it in a bucket of formalin and wash it off, it's bright white. It's like calamari. It's not normal. I mean, I worked for the 18 years I've done, 7 years was working for the coroner in Northamptonshire, subcontracting via the co-op. And that was recovering deceased. That was my body recovery. So I'm fully conversant with the ins and outs of everyone. I've attended hundreds and hundreds of post-mortem cases that have been embalmed. I always took a great interest because it fascinates me, you know. So I know what's normal. I might not know the Latin phrase for every specific nerve and ligament, but I can point my way around the body, identify stuff, and I know if something looks normal or it don't.
Yeah.
You know, I've certainly seen more of the inside of people than any doctor in general practice.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Well, yeah. Like, in fact, I've had them come in and ask me questions, you know. So when you see this and you know it's not normal and people of 30 years old are dying suddenly in numbers that you've never seen before as an undertaker, clearly there's something very, very wrong. And I think I listened to a number of people. One of them was Dr. John Campbell,
Yeah.
and he was quoting the numbers. The last 12 months, it's something like 100,000 excess sudden deaths in the UK in the last year alone. 100,000. That's unbelievable. But what's more unbelievable is the reaction of the politicians. When people like Andrew Bridgen stand up and try and raise those concerns and ask for a debate, he's jeered and booed by the MPs whose constituents that voted him in are dying around them.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. Reaction is that they'll get up and walk out, or they'll go on a jolly to Davos. Do you know, it's unbelievable. I can't believe the public are not already on these people, you know. But it is what it is, you know. So I keep kind of trying to raise concerns, and I hope that I can inspire people and also warn people, you know, don't take these poisonous jabs, because I can tell you what's going to happen. You are going to get sick and you're going to die.
Yeah.
That's the reality. And you may well have been lucky up to now. How many times could you play Russian roulette and get away with it? Only so many, you know. Some people would be lucky than others. And I just what a time to be alive. It's unbelievable. I never thought I'd live through anything like this. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a professional undertaker. You
Yeah.
know, what would I have to gain? Nothing. I've got everything to lose, because I don't doubt at some point they'll try and close me.
Yeah. Are you being approached more now by other professionals with
Oh,
concerns in their fields of
constantly.
expertise? Yeah.
Yeah, constantly. Yeah, constantly. They'll see it. They'll see it. I think the reality is probably many of them didn't expect me to still be about 3 years in.
Yeah.
Is the reality, you know. And they have tried to buy me. They've tried to intimidate me. They even tried to bump me off when I was in hospital. But I was a little bit too strong for that, you know. And I had a good network of friends around me to get me out, to help get me out. And yeah, they haven't been successful. And they might have thought it frightened me. It was frightening, you know. Let's be honest. Nobody wants to die, but at the same time, I've a moral compass that won't allow me to be silent. I can't just stand there and watch them kill people
No.
and under the guise of a lie and call it medicine, you know. And hundreds of people have reached out to me to agree with me. I've got the details of over 100 nurses on my phone who have reached out to me to agree, and that many of them have left nursing, you know, to be replaced by African nurses, agency nurses who will just do as they're told, you know, because there's that cultural disassociation as well. But these nurses were told to give midazolam and morphine in lethal doses. They watch the outcomes. They watch people die, and they cannot bear to be part of that. So they've left the NHS. And this is why, only on the news the other day, it was saying about how only half of the NHS staff are actually clinically trained, because they're all left, because they can't bear to work in an environment where you're doing that to people. And they know, they're not stupid, you know. If you give someone a 60 milligram dose of midazolam, they're going to die. And that's what they're being asked to do. So
And that's it. These people, the doctors and the nurses, they've taken an oath to do no harm. And not only that, the nurses, if they think that the doctors are doing something wrong or causing harm, it is actually the job of the nurse to stand in and stop this. And I'm amazed that none of them are standing by this.
The trouble is you've got, if these girls that have tried to spoke out, they get sacked, they get deregistered, or they just can't bear to be constantly in that kind of environment of killing people, so they've left. So what you've got now is an NHS predominantly filled with agency nurses from abroad who are probably on 10 times the money they are back at home. They're on a really good number. They don't want to spoil that. There's cultural disassociation. They'll do what they're told to do. They don't question it. They just do it. Most of them, I'm hearing horror stories. Many of them are not qualified in any way whatsoever. They've just got in via bogus agencies. And I don't doubt there are government ministers that own shares in these agencies supplying these staff. Do you know? So so that's the reality.
My wife, she was a nurse in England, and she was in the hospitals and ended up on the district. But, you know, she said that, you know, and I'm going back now 15 years, And even back then, she said, all these nurses that are coming in from abroad, she said they are dangerous.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's,
of course. Yeah.
it's
I've laid in a COVID ward and watched them feed respiratory patients midazolam and morphine. I've watched them do it. I've listened to these poor people choking to death. I've watched it firsthand from 10 feet away. And it's just disgusting behavior, disgusting. But they played a very clever psychological game very early on, in that they had everyone standing on doorsteps banging pots, didn't they? All looking at each other, feeling that unison, that camaraderie. These are heroes, you know. And so there's clearly some sort of satanic mocking there, because
yeah,
these people at the top are Satanists, believe it or not. Whether you believe it or not, it doesn't change the truth. They are, a lot of them are quite devil worship, Satan. You know, they're into it big time, and it's a mocking thing, but it's ingrained it into people. No, these are heroes. These are heroes, and they
yeah,
just can't believe it. You know, we've been brought up, haven't we? Two of the most wonderful things you could do is nurse people, isn't it, or be a doctor.
yeah,
But unfortunately, it's not the. It's gone completely. It's almost as though I've gone to bed and I woke up and everything's gone inverted.
yeah.
You
And
know, the people that we could trust, we know that they're our deadliest enemy.
yeah, I don't think I've ever heard anybody that works within the NHS, doctors and nurses, that say that the job is easy and nice, because it never was. Everyone that I've ever spoken to said we work extra hours that we're not paid for.
Mm,
The conditions are terrible. So when this point came where, I think every Tuesday everyone was stood on the steps clapping, all of a sudden, those who have been really pushed down by the employers that they work for, all of a sudden seem to feel that they're getting some kind of recognition, and
yeah, of course,
it's
of
a bit of
course.
a bit of a boost to the ego. They probably feel good
Mm.
about what they're doing, but unfortunately, what they were doing at that time is not good for the patients and the
No,
people
you
around
you
them.
you see it mostly when you're in there. I remember going in. So I took a call from a guy from British Intelligence in November of 2021, and he basically told me that I listened to him for about 40 minutes, and he introduced himself, and he was a comms officer, an older guy, and he told me that things that I was saying was right, and he also told me I was a person of interest and I was going to be targeted. And about 3 weeks later, I fell ill. Was really breathless, went into hospital. I had there was no one in hospital, it was empty, and I'm guessing this was at the time when they're all choreographing TikTok dances and stuff like that. That's how overrun they were. It was all
Yeah,
bullshit. It was
I
I
know.
spoke to nurses that were arguing about who emptied the bins because they were bored, you know. And anyway, I had 3 lateral flow tests because I wouldn't do the PCR test. I spat on a stick and they were all negative. They said you haven't got COVID, but they put me on a COVID ward anyway. Right. So yeah, of course, I knew what was going to happen because I knew. I mean, this comms guy saved my life really, because I knew what to expect when I got there. You know, I knew that I'd been
Yeah,
targeted because I felt like I'd been burnt or poisoned. You know. So anyway, cut a long story short, the following morning on the COVID ward, there was 3 of us in there. In a 4-bed room. This bed next to me was empty. There were 2 guys opposite. One was a couple of years older than me. One was a guy in his early 70s, and they both had CPAP ventilation on. They were trying to convince me to take it, and I said no, because I know it blows your lungs out. You know, I'm not stupid. And then he consultant sat on the bed and he said to me, "I'm here to save your life from COVID." You know, that was the line he led with. So I was like, "Oh, okay." I said, "So have you even looked at my notes?" I said, "Because I haven't got COVID. I've took 3 of your tests. These are the tests that you're putting the elderly on palliative care on the basis of. Are you telling me your tests are not accurate?" And he lost it straight away. He wasn't used to someone talking
yeah,
to him, knowing their shit, you know. And he said, "Oh no, we just want to be sure. We want to be sure." I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, how are you going to save me from COVID I haven't got then?" And he said, "Well, we want to start you on remdesivir." And I laughed through my mask, and I kind of, because they had me on oxygen. And I said to him, "Why would I want to take that?" I said, "Well, I'll tell you what." I said, "You tell me the clinical benefit of remdesivir to me as a respiratory patient, because I haven't got COVID,
yeah.
whilst I look at the side effects. And oh, look, difficulty breathing, difficulty swallowing, tight chested, wheeziness. Why would you give me that?" And do you know what he did? He just got up and walked away. Didn't say a word because he had no argument.
No,
I'm just doing what I'm told. He mumbled as he went away. So about 4 hours later, I had a girl sit on the end of the bed, and she was very, very painfully thin, about late 30s, maybe. Very, very nervous, agitated. Now, I worked on the door for 7 years as a younger man. So I'm good at reading people. I've been a funeral director for 18. I'm working, reading people, and she was like that. She sat down. She couldn't look at me in the face. And I knew straight away to be wary of her. And the first line she said, "I'm here to save you from COVID." Yeah, like it's out of a book of coercion, Muppets. So I said, "Oh, okay," and we went through the same thing. I said, "Have you even looked at my notes? I haven't got COVID. I've had 3 of your tests. These are the tests that you're putting the elderly on palliative care that are coming in with a water infection, and you're spam testing them till you get a positive, then killing them." I said, "Well, you tell me." I said, "You tell me the clinical benefits of whatever drugs you're going." "Oh, well, we want to give you 2 drugs. It's not remdesivir." I said, "All right, what is it then?" She said one of them was called baricitinib, and the other one was called tocilizumab. Now, they're both drugs that are used to treat chronic arthritis. I said, "All right." I said, "Well, you tell me the clinical benefits to me as a respiratory patient while I look at the side effects. Difficulty breathing, difficulty swallowing, kidney function, liver." When you're like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
"Oh, I'm only doing what I'm told. I'm sorry, I'm only doing what I'm told, and then scuttle away like, "I'll come back tomorrow." I said, "Don't bother." And I knew then I had to get out, because what they wanted was the death of a prominent anti-vaxxer from COVID.
Yeah.
That's what they wanted. I'm not stupid, So I'm lucky that I had a support structure, and the 2 guys opposite, they had coerced into taking them. Obviously, could hear the conversation. You should see the look on their face. I'll never forget the terror on the guy on the left's face, because he knew he'd fucked up. He believed them, and he'd signed the waiver. And I suspect both of them were going to die. They were choking all night. And these African nurses, who wouldn't even talk to you, just come around and bring medication, were taking him shots of morphine. People that are choking to death, giving them morphine. Now, I'm not a doctor. Why would you give someone morphine who can't breathe?
Yeah.
They're not in pain. They're not in pain. Why would you do that? This is what's happened inside British hospitals, So I managed to get a gentleman by the name of Mark Sexton, retired police constable. He came in and saved me, and he brought a doctor with him, who I'm not going to name because they'll only chase after him, who agreed to advocate medically. And then I had a 3-hour battle to get out. They called security, threatened to arrest me. Yeah, and on what basis? And I kind of said to him, "On what basis are you going to arrest me then? It's a fucking hospital. It's not a prison."
It's not a prison.
I don't know. I'm going home. I've got a doctor who's going to advocate for me, and I've got people that look after me. And they even went so desperate. There was a guy called there, Mr. Daripali, his name was. He was a respiratory consultant, and he rang my missus and said, "As soon as John leaves the ward, he'll die if you don't sign him in." Trying to coerce her into sectioning me in there so that they could finish me off. Muppets, and I walked out of there. All right, I shuffled out, but I walked out. I never had any oxygen. I told them I had oxygen at home. I never.
Yeah.
And I survived. The people that had all the medicine snuffed it.
That's scary.
I know what's going on. And I kind of wondered, why did my life take me on that journey? And I suspect it's to relay the story to people, to tell people what I've seen.
Yeah.
And there's a mixture of people in there. So some of the nurses, for the first thing, I had 2 different members of staff come over to me and thank me for what I was doing. One was a porter, one was a nurse. They weren't on my ward. They actively came and found me and to thank me, because they heard that I was in there. And Mark Sexton, when he came in, a nurse pulled him in the lift, and she said, "Please save us."
Yeah.
Please save us. This is not someone having a conversation about the weather or exchanging pleasantries. These girls are involved in murder, mass murder, genocide on an industrial scale in British hospitals. And people need to know what's going on, so that when their mum goes in with a water infection and they spam testing them for COVID, and they're asymptomatic, but they treat them for COVID, and they suddenly slide and get a phone call, "Oh, mum hasn't got long," because they're filling them up with midazolam and morphine.
Yeah.
People need to be aware of what's going on. And for God's sake, don't put your mum, or if you've got an ailment that you can treat at home, please do it, because I can tell you now, once you're over 55, 60 years old, you go into a British hospital, they're trying their hardest to bump as many off as they can. And I've seen it firsthand. I know it's going on.
Yeah. Oh, it's scary. It is. Now, is the age demographics changing for the deaths that you're seeing? And, where are we seeing the increases?
I'm seeing numbers of people in their 30s and 40s and 50s dying that I've never ever seen before in 18 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I heard the numbers quoted. The death rate in the under 14s has gone up 22% since the vaccine rollout. And I would suggest it's 22% perhaps that have been vaccinated. That's the reality, because not everyone is gullible enough to have a gene therapy put in their kids. I
No.
think they understand that if you've got a healthy child with no comorbidities, what reason would you have to want to throw gene therapy in them? Because that's what these jabs are. They're based on the mRNA platform. It's gene therapy.
Yeah. What's the sentiment of the people in the UK currently? Are we still seeing large protests there, and are people fighting?
To be honest with you, I've been down to London a couple of times early on during the lockdown process when I started to see through the lie. I felt that I was wasting my time because there were probably 20, 30,000 outside Westminster. They're not listening. They're totally ignoring them.
Yeah.
So it became apparent to me very quickly that the best input that I could give the British public was to talk to people like yourself. So I've not attended these protests. I don't doubt there's still people going. What difference is making is none. They're just going to gaslight until they can usher in the WHO at the end of May. That is their aim, I'm telling you. And then these people will probably sit back or scurry off to their bunkers as the madness unfolds, because I can tell you the WHO have already got enough death rate now to declare another pandemic.
Yeah.
And if they do, they'll have total sovereignty. And I suspect what they'll do is probably roll out some sort of uniformed health corps they'll mandate, and they'll go door to door. I believe that is a possibility for the future under these people. It's whether we can. It's a numbers game, and it's whether you can wake enough numbers up to stop it. I don't know. I can do that, but at some point in the future, because evil never ever prevails, it always is defeated in the end. So at some point, my son will read about what I've done, or if God willing, I'll be alive to tell him about what I've done. And he'll say to me, "What did you do to stop it, Dad?" And I'll be able to tell him. There's going to be a lot of people that will have nothing to tell their kids.
Yeah.
What is your legacy as a doctor going to be? What is your legacy as a copper going to be?
Yeah.
Are you going to be part of genocide and democide, killing women, children, and babies, your own communities? The RNLI, as a funeral director, I was always for supporting them. I wouldn't piss on them if they were on fire. What they've done on Kent Coast, ferrying these young lads in, destroying their own communities. If I was a lifeboat man, I would refuse. I would go and find work somewhere else. And I haven't done that. They kept ferrying them in. So what we've got is a lot of previously good people doing very bad things for money. And how long do you keep a secret before you're then complicit in the crime? If I was a GP, right, and I'm injecting people with this gene therapy, and then 3 days later they're coming in because they've got myocarditis, or 2 weeks later they've got stage 4 terminal cancer, and I'm speaking to these people that are reaching out to me, relaying these stories, so I know it's happening. And as a doctor, you know the numbers in the same way as I do. The people I put in coffins, I know who should die, when, and in what numbers and what ages, because I've been doing it 18 years. So there's a pattern there. That's how they caught the GP, Harold Shipman.
I remember him, yeah.
Yeah, he was 200 over the average. Let me tell you, Harold Shipmans are everywhere in the NHS at the minute. They've just got different names.
Yeah.
They're doing it right now, and people need to wise up. So where we're going to go moving forward, I really don't know. I think I've kind of come to the conclusion it's got to get really dystopian and dark for the masses to see it. Yeah. And then they'll kind of clamor to get back to the light, is my hope. I really don't know. I'll keep telling the truth right until they come and take me away, though.
Yeah. I'm hoping for civil unrest. It sounds crazy.
Well, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because civil unrest, they need civil unrest to that's what the big prisons are for. The shiny new big prisons that are suddenly a priority in the middle of a terrible pandemic and the worst economic downturn since World War II. Shiny new prisons are a priority. Yeah. What can't people see? I'm 56. How many Home Office ministers have I heard in my lifetime talk about prison overcrowding and doing something to resolve it? They've never done anything. And yet they've chosen this period of time in history where there's a deadly pandemic and the worst economic downturn since World War II to build loads and loads of new huge prisons.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is Sir Graham Brady talked about it. He said they're preparing because they know it's going to be civil unrest because people don't like being poisoned or killed and their kids sterilised.
Yeah. That's
So
it.
when they find out, it was put to him at the end of the meeting in September of 2021. When people find out what you've done, there'll be civil war. And he actually admitted, he said, yes, they know and they're preparing. That's what the prisons are for. That's why they're ferrying in thousands and thousands of young men of fighting age. I suspect these will probably be the WHO Health Corps. You know, where you'll what we'll see is a government minister will say, we've had a wonderful new idea of how these guys can contribute.
Yeah.
And they'll roll them out as Health Corps. And there'll still be silly bastards, 9 jabs in, tapping on doorsteps, hanging onto a Zimmer frame for these Health Corps.
Yeah.
That's the reality. You know, why am I wired differently where I see through it and other people don't? Maybe because I'm an undertaker, maybe because I've got a little bit more spunk about me. I don't know, but I see it clearly. I've sat in the meetings in Westminster. Anyone who don't believe it, do you know what? I can't waste energy on them because they're not savable.
No.
It is what it is. And I do wonder what they're going to do when they've killed these poor souls off and they are going to die. They're going to die because they're going to keep taking these poisons. And as their health slowly declines, they're going to need more and more protection, aren't they?
Definitely. Definitely.
A weight loss jab, a measles jab, a shingles jab, a booster, a spring booster, a COVID jab, disease X jab. It's never ending. And these people cannot see through it.
No.
I really, I don't know what else I can do that I haven't done.
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, sadly, the faith that people have in them is, it's unjustified now. And you mentioned it a few minutes ago, Harold Shipman. Now, if I'm right in thinking, I mean, for people that don't know Harold Shipman and who's watching this outside the UK, this was a doctor that killed, possibly in the hundreds of people.
Well, I'll tell you what actually happened, and I always, because I take great time to explain everything when I do a funeral for my clients, and this is the template I use to explain. So we have something here called cremation paperwork. Now, when someone passes away in hospital, they have a doctor come down off the ward to the mortuary there, and he sometimes do half a dozen at a time as death certificates and cremation paperwork for cremation. And the way it worked was Harold Shipman was an odious man who would befriend his elderly patients on his round. He would ask them what their plans were for their funeral. And if they said cremation and he didn't like the look of them or whatever, he would offer them a vitamin injection of morphine and he would kill them. Now, the way he got caught is quite interesting. So if I took 10 doctors and you looked at those doctors and their round and their patients, there would be an average number of deaths across those 10 doctors, roughly. A couple might be a bit higher, a couple might be lower. He was 200 over the average. And in the end, if you play God long enough, you get complacent, you get greedy. Harold Shipman wrote himself in on a couple of the wills. So not only did Mum die shortly after seeing Harold Shipman, she's left him her house. Yeah, so the guy, he got stupid and careless and probably complacent. If you kill enough people, if you kill a person, you're a murderer, aren't you? If you kill a million, you're a conqueror. And he got complacent. And what they put in place, and the way they caught him was a couple of the people that he thought were going to be cremated, their families opted for a burial. So there's the evidence sitting in a sealed coffin. So the families were complaining. The coroner ended up ordering exhumation. They dug these poor souls up and they found they were full of morphine. They weren't even ill. And that was how they got Shipman. And he died. He cheated justice because he killed himself in a prison cell. Now, I can tell you now, without even blinking, there are doctors, many, many doctors in the NHS doing that exactly now.
Yeah.
That's happening now. So, and that is under government policy. Does it make it right? No, it doesn't. No, it does not. When will we see justice? I don't know. I kind of wonder if it'll only be after a great deal of civil unrest, unfortunately. And I don't want to encourage anyone to commit crime, but it is enshrined in law that you can protect yourself relative to the threat that you face. And I don't think there's much more deadly threat than deadly jabs that are going to kill and maim you. The cancer patients, for example, that I'm seeing as well now. So pre-COVID jab, we would get people come to us and they'd, so the phone rings, I take the phone call, I book the family in, I see the family, I arrange the funeral, I do the paperwork, I direct on the day, I wash and dress their loved ones, put them in coffins with the help of my embalmer back of house. So I see them the whole way through the process, and it's nice because you get some continuity, you get to know that family, and at some point they tell you the story. And you'd say, you know, what happened to mum? And they would tell you. And they have a cancer story. And that cancer story would be 2, 5, 10 years long. Now we're seeing people in their 30s and 40s and 50s dying from cancer 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, from asymptomatic, totally leading a normal life, to dead before they're even getting one treatment. I've had loads and loads of nurses, hospice nurses, writing to me and telling me, yes, we're seeing that as well. We're getting people coming in their 30s and 40s, glioblastoma, brain cancer, seeing unprecedented numbers, and they're absolutely oblivious. Everyone comes in, of course, they think it's bad luck. They can't see it. I'm seeing more and more in now who know, and they won't have no more, but there's still 3, 4 jabs in. So they're all ticking time bombs, you know, and I have to tread carefully because as a funeral director, I can tell you, no one cares about people more than me. No one. That's why I put my ass on the line.
Yeah.
Because I actually do care. I'm not here for someone who's just lost a child or their mum or their dad to tell them, oh, by the way, your mum or your dad was murdered. That's not me. You know, I'm here in the capacity as a funeral director. If they ask me, are you seeing loads of deaths in young people from blood clots? I'll be honest with them. And I'll say, yes, I am. Because I'm not going to sit there and fucking lie.
Yeah.
You know, so that is, and I'm seeing more and more people that are coming to me and they know. I'm even getting people coming to me asking me to embalm people and have a look that are out of area, you know. And we're finding stuff in them as well. So it is what it is now. It's going to unfold the way it is, but I ain't never going to shut up because my dad brought me up to say honesty is the best policy. You know, you don't lie, especially when there's something as terrible as this. Why would I want to be? What kind of guy would I be if I didn't say anything? At what point do I cross that boundary, that moral compass boundary, from being reluctant to speak out for fear of it damaging me reputationally or my business, to actually being complicit in a crime?
Yeah.
Because this is, I tell you now, this is a biblical crime. And you know what Bridgen said, the cardio specialist quoted him, and he was saying about it, paling the Holocaust into significance. I agree. This is going to be Holocaust levels of death. And the numbers I'm hearing is between 17 and 20 million globally have died after being COVID jabbed.
Yeah, that's it. I mean,
the numbers we were given was 6 million in the Holocaust. So that's at least 3 times that. And I would suggest probably more.
Yeah. Any doctors, any nurses, anyone who is complicit, full well knowing that this is going on, this must weigh heavily on the soul.
I wonder, do you know what? How do you look at yourself in the mirror? Do you go home from work and say, yeah, I managed to bump another 12 off today? Or what goes through their minds? And how long? I mean, I know certainly as an undertaker, I know these youngsters coming in is not normal. But after 2 or 3 years of seeing 40-year-olds presenting with 8-week cancer, they're normalizing it. They're normalizing it. Where it's, if I get someone come in and say, I mean, I had a guy 10 days ago, we did his funeral last week, 40 years old, and he's left 2 kids under 6. Do you know?
Yeah. That's
normal now. That's a regular thing. That used to be, I could count them on one hand when I worked for the co-op. I worked, so to give you an idea, when I worked for the co-op, particular branch we were doing, it was doing about 800 funerals a year. And busy is a relative term. You know, if you've got a huge place with dozens of staff, you probably do more funerals. But in the area I was in Northampton, and out of those 800 funerals a year, probably I could count the people under 50 on one hand. I've seen that some months now as a funeral director doing 160 funerals a year.
Yeah.
So it's gone through the roof, young deaf. And they've all got one thing in common. They've had these jabs. They've had these fucking jabs. And I don't care. Rishi Sunak, who's got 500 million pound in Moderna in shares, can bang his pen on the lectern in Westminster and say they're safe and effective as long as he likes. I will go to my grave calling him a liar, a serial liar and a criminal. That's what he is.
Yeah, they're not stupid. They know exactly what's going on.
Do you know what? They are stupid because they're going to get sussed out and they're going to end up in Nuremberg.
Yeah.
And my hope is that I live to see it, to testify, because I will, and I will see them hang.
Yeah, definitely. Is there any telltale signs within the health industry of those who have done this? Is there any uptick in suicides?
Oh, the suicides have gone through the roof. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
this is
just generally, yeah. It's oh, of course. I mean, I think that there are fundamental traits that humans possess. Now, one of them is where most of us are fundamentally good, and that has lent itself to what they've done. Because when you say to people, your nurses and the doctors are killing people in hospitals who are not terminally ill, nobody can believe it because they wouldn't do it themselves.
Yeah.
Nobody can believe it because they're inherently, for the most part, good. Other people are greedy. We've become a nation of consumers by design, haven't we? The adverts on the telly, the bigger house, the bigger the car, everything want more and more and more and more and more. Now, for example, doctors. Now, when they were rolling out these jabs, these doctors were getting paid £10 a jab. They could do up to 100 tax-free. They only got taxed on the 101st. So they can earn £5,000 a week, 20 grand a month jabbing. Why do you think your phone was getting spammed with invitations to go and get a jab? Why do you think that's
Yeah.
what they were doing? And I've spoke to people. I spoke to one girl particularly who reached out to me. She worked in a vaccination center, and she said at the time she couldn't believe how many people had a needle phobia. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, we were jabbing them and they were falling over within 2 minutes. And they were told that, well, that's what they were being told, because these are not clinically trained staff. These were members of the public offered 30 quid an hour. So if you've got no skill set and they offer you a job for 30 quid an hour, and they'll train you and they give you half hour on how to put a syringe in, take the stuff and pop it in an arm,
Yeah.
you're going to take that job, because nobody took that job thinking they thought they were helping.
Yeah.
And the madness, the insanity of it. And she said that they were actually told that it's needle phobia, don't worry, as they were carting all these people away. And she said she saw loads and loads of them fall over. But she said, I can't believe so many people have got a needle phobia. It weren't fucking needle phobia. They were having heart attacks and strokes there and then. I had one girl in here, Stafford was the surname, Chantel Stafford, and her family won't mind me telling you, because they're very, very angry. She went into hospital, right? So what was happening? This was in 2021. She went in for a minor procedure, right? And they look at your records, and straight away they go on the attack. Oh, so you're not vaccinated. Oh, it's people like you keeping it alive. You're killing people. How can you be so selfish? And then they go on the psychology reversal, and you're in hospital. And it's really dangerous because you're surrounded by COVID. Let us protect you while you're in here. So they coerced this girl, bang, 90 minutes later, she was dead, 28 years old.
Sure.
And the coroner had cut her from the ankle to the hip looking for the blood clots. And I know, because I had to try and seal her legs up so they never leaked. 28 years old, healthy girl, no comorbidities, in for a minor procedure, lied and attacked and coerced until she submitted and then was killed.
Yeah.
And this is up and down the country. This is not just unique to me. And until people see it en masse, and it's usually only when it touches their family, when they lose someone in their family, then they see it. Do I think it's going to be civil unrest? No, I don't think so. I think if 5 million of us marched on London and we just sat there, what are they going to do? They're going to have to war. It will collapse government. We haven't got to smash stuff up. In fact, we've got to do exactly the opposite and be peaceful and not give them the excuse they need. Because these people have got all the weapons, they've got all the guns, they've got all the young men that hate us because of the actions of our government. Now, in World War II, right, I was told and I was taught that we went to war with Germany because they invaded Poland, and that was an act of war.
Yeah.
Going into a sovereign land. Now, I get that. Look at what we've done. Libya, Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq. It's a never-ending catalogue of tyranny.
Yeah.
So these young men that they're ferrying in for the East hate us. They're coming in, they already hate us.
Yeah.
It's going to be very easy for them to police us on behalf of the WHO if they are deployed as health corps. And
Yeah.
people just can't see that happening. They just don't believe it. Even when there's an excess death rate of 100,000 dying around them, they still can't see it.
Yeah.
And I really don't, I don't know. And I've come to the conclusion you can only just keep saying the same thing so long. Eventually, you've just got to say, okay, well, I told you so, as they deploy them. And they'll still bang on pots on doorstep for them because they're frightened and
Yeah.
because they believe the bullshit. Is there something in these jabs that's twisting their mind? I think it must be.
Oh yeah, I've seen it in people. I've seen
Yeah.
I've seen the
You see it
darkness in their
yeah.
eyes.
Well, you see, they seem to lose. I noticed it in my own brother and my former best friend, where he seemed to lose the ability to think critically and empathy and compassion.
Yeah.
Gone, just gone. And I managed to. So I'll tell you the story, right? So I had a best friend, and he was frightened. It frightened him. They were telling him everyone's going to die and lungs, and he had asthma. And he rung me up, and he's in IT, bless him. And he said to me, "I need you to write me a letter, John." I said, "What do you mean, Dan?" And he said, I'm really frightened about COVID, and if you write a letter saying that you work for me, I work for you part time, they'll bump me up the queue, and I can have mine a bit early because if I get it, I'll die." So I said to him, listen, I said, well, he was frightened, and I get that.
Yeah, I understand that.
And I kind of said to him, look, Dan, I said, don't do it. I said, because I'm seeing, and I didn't know then what I know now, but I said to him, I'm seeing a lot of vaccine recipients coming in who have died. They're getting blood clots, and we're seeing them. I could see the ages. As they were working down the ages with these vaccines, this was the age group that was coming in, so initially it was all of the 70s and 80s, a sudden surge of them. And as they worked down the age group with the jabs, which is what they would do, they were rolling it out, weren't they? Moving the goalposts constantly, saying only the most vulnerable, only the 60s, only the 50s, only the 40s. Oh, you can't travel. Oh, you can't work. Oh, you're protecting your vulnerable mum. I saw these age groups dying. I was putting them in coffins. But he wouldn't believe me, and he took these jabs. And at the moment he did, it was almost like a light went off inside him. He just couldn't, I was trying to explain to him, saying, look, Dan, I'm seeing him. And I remember talking to him one day and saying, well, what about all these clots that I've got coming in? And he said to me, well, that's life. And when you're like, that's not Danny. That's not what he would have said.
No.
He would have been, the old Danny would have been absolutely mortified that these kids had died. He wasn't bothered. He was matter of fact about, and it changes the personality inside these people. And I kind of, as heartbreaking as it is, I had to kind of just let go and go, do you know what? Okay, I've got so many other people I've got to try and save.
Yeah.
What's the point in banging your head for people that have they're fundamentally gone? My own brother's absolutely fundamentally, his brain is gone. He just can't see it. He's very aggressive. He thinks I'm a nutter. He works in sheet steel. I put people in coffins. He knows more than me about who's dying.
Yeah, it's
They're
great.
just that. Yeah, they've lost that. I don't know what it is because I kind of thought these people. One of the things I loved about my mate was he was a compassionate guy. He loved people. He would hold the door open for a lady. He'd be bothered if a youngster had died, and he's not bothered now. It's that's life. And
Yeah.
I remember saying to him, but they're talking about mandating. And he said, well, that's the world we live in now. That isn't the guy that I knew. That isn't the mindset of the guy that I knew. 30 years, I knew this guy like a brother. And his mind changed from, was it the psychological job they played? Probably partly. Was it something that was in these jabs that's affecting people's ability to think? But I think so as well. Yeah, I think definitely.
Very possible. Very possible.
Yeah, oh, without a doubt. You see it most clearly in the people that you know best, don't you? If there's a character change in someone nearly as well as yourself, you see it really clearly. And I see it in both of them. And I mourn the loss of both of them, but I can't reflect. I've got to move onwards and forwards, and I've got to focus on why I'm here. And I believe that I'm here to try and save as many other people as I can. And I'm going to carry on doing that right up until they come and drag me off somewhere. I really don't care.
Yeah. Is there any regulatory oversight in the business of funeral directing? And if so, has there been any guidelines or rules changed over the past few years for what you...
So there's a very interesting. There are two bodies that oversee funeral directors, only in an advisory capacity, and this shocked me. I remember when I first set up, thinking, I'm going to go. Obviously, I'm going to go all legit. I'm going to do whatever I need to do and get the license. And there is no license. It's the A1 classification in the retail classification. It's harder to get a sweet shop because you're selling things that people consume. That's the reality, yeah.
Yeah.
So the two governing bodies that oversee are the NAFD and the SAIF, and I was a member of the SAIF. And pretty soon, pretty early on, they contacted me when I first started raising concerns and said that I was bringing them into disrepute as a member. And I said, well, what do you mean? You know, I'm noticing that people are dying, and we have a moral obligation to raise those concerns. Let me explain. If I go to the hospital, right, and I pick someone up from the hospital and I bring them back and I roll them over on my tray in my mortuary, and there's a knife hanging out their back or a puncture wound,
Yeah.
have to raise those concerns. I do that for two reasons. One, I do it because I'm a decent fucking human being. And number two, I do it because I have a legal obligation. You know, he is potentially a murder. There, I have concerns. I've raised those concerns. I've been to the local police station a couple of years ago with Mark Sexton. Incident number was 1068. I spoke to the desk sergeant. I said, you know, I'm a local funeral director. I'm running a funeral home. I've got concerns over a number of deaths that I'm seeing. I really need to talk to someone to explain those concerns. Can I speak to someone, please? And they left me sitting there 3 hours. The desk sergeant went upstairs and he came back down. He'd obviously been told no. So we sat there for 3 hours. He wouldn't even talk to us, wouldn't even listen to what I was saying. You know, think about what I've just said. I go in, I say I'm running a funeral home. I don't elaborate. I say I've got concerns about a number of deaths that I'm seeing in people in my care. I'd like to be able to talk to someone, a police officer, please, just to voice that. They wouldn't even see me. And then they said, oh, no, all our officers are busy. We'll be in touch. What are they busy that's more important than a number of deaths?
Yeah. What's probably the worst crime ever? You know, it's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, are they out doing speed cameras? Are they chasing people for a Facebook a hate post?
Facebook post.
Yeah. Do you know, it's fucking ridiculous. And this is where we are. This is where we are. It is what it is now. You know, it is what it is.
With any death, though, with any death, especially sudden deaths at home, the police have to come out and rule out any foul play. But have any police spoken to you about these increases or the unusual?
No, they won't. They won't talk about it. I've spoke to officers in here off the record where they've knocked on the door and they've come in and they've come not officially and they've openly admitted they know what's going on. So I said to them, the last one was a police officer, a woman, a lady police officer. And I said, why won't they pursue these people? And they've been briefed that it's a matter of national security because the amount of civil unrest that will happen when people find out what's been done, that is a matter of national security. And it is. So that's why that's why they won't speak. And they're on a vow of silence. And you've got to remember, many of these police officers, they're in lodges up and down the country, same as the coroners. They're in lodges up and down the country. They're not going to say nothing. They've got a vow of silence. They've got the conviction of a Japanese soldier on a Pacific island in the 1960s, still believing the war is on, you know, and they will. And of course, now they've kept the secret for so long, they are complicit in the crime.
Yeah.
They're co-conspirators. So they're going to lose everything. And of course, that makes their determination and conviction that much stronger, doesn't it?
Definitely. I spoke to a psychologist when I was back in England over December. She's a psychologist and a counsellor in the UK whose job it was to work with bereaved women who have lost their baby during childbirth or pregnancy. Now, her workload has more than doubled. And, you know, she said it was just because of awareness. But, you know, how enormous does this have to be, you know, for it to get noticed by everyone else? You know,
I've spoke to loads of midwives who have reached out to me, loads more than you'll ever know. They've openly said the babies are being born early, underweight, and they see the clots in the placentas. They physically can see them in front of them. More and more babies are born with issues and sickly, and it's very interesting, the baby death rate. So what they did, there's a guy in Australia called Dr. Luke McClendon, right? So this Dr. Luke McClendon was head of fertility in an area called Mater, M-A-T-E-R, in Australia. Now, this guy collated the numbers and he released the numbers because he was really concerned. Now, the regular miscarriage rate in mothers is between 5 and 14%. That's just the regular miscarriage rate. And I think, it's not something we really talk about, is it? Who wants to talk about people losing babies? We don't. Perhaps not as much as we should. Now, he found that the number of people losing their babies in vaccinated mothers was 76%. So three quarters of the mothers that were vaccinated lost their kids. So he raised those concerns. What did they do? Did they congratulate him for spotting something terrible? Or no, they sacked him straight away. Yeah, clear your desk, out. Why would you do that unless it's a deliberate act? It's a deliberate act. And then I've heard about Senator Roberts in the Australian Senate openly declaring the birth rate in Australia has gone down 67% since the vaccine rollout. What can't people see? So what we saw initially was a huge increase in baby deaths in expectant mothers. And of course, they're banging these poisons in these young babies who are dying. So the birth rate, the death rate, sorry, climbed. And now, because they've sterilized these women that have had these jabs, the birth rate is in massive decline. And if you don't get pregnant, you can't lose a baby. So, of course, the death rate has gone back down to what appear to be relatively normal, historically, numbers, because the women can't get pregnant now because they've been sterilized. And the other thing we're seeing is a funeral director. So what used to happen if people used to lose a baby, that would liaise with what's called a bereavement team at the hospital.
Yeah.
So this bereavement team would obviously look after these parents. They would give them a list of authorized funeral directors that the parents would then go and touch base with and to arrange a funeral. Now, as a funeral director, I don't charge for any child under 18. I even pay the coffin out of my own pocket because I can't profit off the death of a child. And historically, there are not that many children that die. So it's not too terrible an impact. We're not suddenly seeing hardly any baby deaths, and I couldn't understand why. I'm hearing about all these kids dying, but the phone's not ringing. Why is that? And then when you go down to the crematorium, there's a waiting room, and in the waiting room there's an information board, and on the information board it scrolls the day's funerals, and it's pretty much the same template any crematorium you go. And in the UK, cremation accounts for about 90% of the funerals that we do. So 9 in 10 funerals are cremations. The other 10% are burials. So it will say John Smith, the 1 p.m. In the Oak Chapel, and then it has the arranging funeral director underneath. Milton Keynes Hospital, Milton Keynes Hospital, Milton Keynes. All the baby funerals are now being done directly from the hospital. Now, I've spoke to a guy in detail who worked at the crematorium, and he tells me they send a van down there. They'll pick 6, 8 babies up at a time some weeks. That's what's happening. They're cutting out the funeral directors and dealing with the crematorium directly. Now, this is at a time when we're seeing the worst economic downturn since World War II.
Yeah.
Money has always been an issue for the NHS. Why are they paying for the funerals of babies now, suddenly, out of the blue? Why is that, where they weren't doing that before?
Yeah.
It's to hide it. There's no other reason but to do that, I was never charging family a penny. So it isn't a financial need.
No.
Do you know? It is what it is. It is what it is. But more and more people are seeing it now, and more people know. The trouble is, if you get people come in and they've lost a child, they genuinely think they're the only ones. They think they've had bad luck and they've been unlucky. They don't realize that there's been a 76% increase in vaccinated mothers losing their children.
Yeah.
And of course, what do? The ONS data, they rejuggle the figures, don't they? They've done it recently so that it makes it harder to see the real numbers. It's and people like Dr. John Campbell have talked about that, and loads of others. Katie Hopkins, amongst others, have talked about how the ONS data has now been reformulated to hide the deaths.
Yeah.
So I'm not in any doubt this was going to happen. Come May, when they usher the WHO in, you're going to see the shit hit the fan. I'll tell you that now.
Yeah, it's not something to look forward to. Now,
no, I'm dreading it. I'm dreading it because I know what they're going to do.
Past few years, this has been, fear and stress compiled with depression and mental illness. And this has massively increased with the media and government propaganda machine. Now, have you seen higher numbers of the public committing suicide in relation?
Yeah, massively. Yeah, massively. It's gone through the roof. Constantly. I used to get suicides in and it was a real rarity. Now it's commonplace. You know, people in their 30s, their 40s. Some of that is financial because they're deliberately ruining the economy. Some of that is due to them being so full of medication, they're out of their fucking mind anyway. Because, you know, if you go to the doctors now, it's very interesting because as a funeral director, I often get people come to me who offer me professional counseling services. Now, I can tell you, as a decent human being, I counsel people constantly, all the time. People come in here, they can have a cup of tea. I'll sit and I'll talk to them for an hour.
Yeah.
I don't charge them for my time. I do it because I'm a decent human. And if I see someone as low, and when you spend a lot of time around the company of death, you get a template, and I know what people want to hear, and I know what makes them feel better. And I will say it because I care about people. I don't need to be paid to do that. Obviously, I'm paid for the course of my work, but I give a lot of my time out counseling people for nothing.
Yeah.
I don't do it for nothing. I do it because it makes me feel good,
Oh yeah.
helping other people out, you know. And I think what we're seeing now, one of the first things they cut is mental health services. There's no blood, there's no bandage, there's no broken arm, is there? So they cut it, and they know these people are going to die. They give them toxic tablets that they become dependent on, you know, and every customer cured would be a customer lost, wouldn't it? And I
Yeah.
think happiness has to come from within. So I think the key to these young people is getting mental help, is getting just to talk. That doesn't have to be someone with a list of certificates handing out
No.
pills. That could be someone they love and respect and trust, giving them good, sound, solid advice. Do you know? But we live in an age now. For example, when I was a kid, I used to live in the street and there was no mobile phones, there was no internet. I knew where everyone lived. I knew the number of the door they was at, and FaceTime was you went and knocked on the door, you
Yeah.
know, and everyone was like that then.
Mhm.
You know, so you could 5-year-old kids could all play out in the street because mum was at home, only dad went to work, and there was real community. You know, look at a school photo. One of the most telling things. So if I look at a school photo, um, class of '84 when I left, right? You've got 26 lean, happy, healthy kids.
Yeah.
Look at it now. You've got half of them are morbidly obese. 3 or 4 of them have got somewhere on the spectrum of ADHD or autism. You've got a transgender one, and one thinks they're a fucking cat.
Yeah.
What are they? What are we thinking? What are we doing? We're going backwards.
Oh
And
yeah.
we're going backwards because there is no one to vote for. And I'll tell you, the only way out of this is everyone needs to turn their back on these politicians. Turn their back on them. So go and vote. That's the first thing. Don't say, I don't vote because it's not worth it. Because if you don't vote, you inadvertently give your consent to whoever is elected because you've had the opportunity and you haven't taken it. You need to go and vote, guys. Take a Sharpie marker pen with you and write, I do not consent through all of the candidates' names. Post that vote. At the end of the vote, in a constituency of 40,000, they'll read those votes out and they'll read the spoiled ones out. Let these Muppets get elected on a handful of sheep votes, so that there are 250 votes getting someone elected and 25,000 spoilt ballots.
Yeah.
You've got to send a clear message because there is no democracy. I can tell you, when I sat down and I listened to what Sir Graham said, and we told him what was going to happen. I told him what I'd seen and who was dying. Then I listened to all the doctors as it went around the table, and they told him about who was going to die, the heart conditions, the cancers, when it was going to happen, the time scale. They said between 2 years and 5 years post-vaccine. He sat there ashen-faced. You could, and it was interesting because as a people person, while they were all watching whoever was talking, I was just clocking Graham Brady and looking at his face, because me looking at how he reacted to what was said was very revealing to
Yeah.
me as a reader of people. And he knew. He openly admitted it was above his pay grade. This is the commissioner of the 1922 committee. There is no one above him in politics. There's no one above him officially, and he admitted it's above his pay grade. So that tells you, what does that tell you? It told the whole table there is no democracy. It's two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
They do what they're told to do, but what they do is they give you the charade, the smoke and mirrors of a vote, a general election. So you go in there and you feel like you're making a difference, and you're not. They're just following the orders from the people upstairs that they're given to follow. And it doesn't matter. I mean, what's the choice for us, Labour or Tory? Tories who have all got shares in Moderna or the mask companies, the PPR companies,
Yeah.
killing us off, or we've got people like Keir Starmer, who was in charge of the CPS when the decision was made not to prosecute Jimmy Savile.
Yeah.
And the reason for that, I've spoken to officers again, because it was deemed a matter of national security, because he was at the parties abusing these kids with so many politicians, it would have brought Westminster, the whole of Westminster down.
Yeah.
That's a matter of national security, apparently.
Well,
So until
it's very,
people need to turn their backs on all of them,
yeah.
and these people that crave power. Do you know, if you crave power, you're not fit to wield it. The
Yeah.
people we should put in power are the people that don't want to be in power. They see it as a privilege, an opportunity to leave a legacy, to leave this world a little bit better than when they came in. And I would like to see a total dismantling of Westminster, and I would like to see voting for policy, because if we all voted for half a dozen policies, the one that was the most popular would get in. That is democracy. And policy isn't corruptible. Politicians are.
Yeah.
You've got facilities designed to compromise politicians, places like Epstein Island, where they're getting these people like Boris Johnson, who's got 7 kids by half a dozen different women, hasn't he? And he's got the morals of an alley cat. Well, if you ply these guys with beer and coke and throw them in bed with a couple of 15-year-olds and you've got it on video, that's what is compromised. That's why when Andrew Bridgen tries to raise concerns in Westminster about 100,000 excess deaths in the last 12 months of constituents, they boo and jeer and get up and walk out. Not because they're all evil. Some of them are weak and they've been compromised on places like Epstein Island.
Yeah.
Some of them are inherently evil and they'll be in a dark club upstairs somewhere, thrilled at the thought of loads of young deaths. And others are just chic. They're bought. They can't believe, and they think they've got a seat on the ark. They've been offered a seat on the ark. And that's what we've got. There is no one to vote for. And the sooner people see it and turn their backs on these people and look at networking again, turn your telly off. The best thing, one of the best bits of advice I could give people, turn your terrestrial TV off.
Yeah.
Turn it off. By all means, watch an action film. I love films. I love escaping for half hour into that fantasy world of superheroes and action westerns and whatever it be. But do you know what? Terrestrial TV, the news, turn it all off. It's utter rubbish. Utter rubbish.
Yeah. That's it. Now, if anybody in the medical establishment or any related fields wants to contact you with what they're seeing going on, can you guarantee animosity for them? Would then you be able to become a spokesman on their behalf?
It's a very good question, a very difficult question. I am trying to be a dad. I'm trying to be a husband. I'm probably not doing as good a job as I should be on both because I'm so absorbed with what is happening around us. And it's that's because I'm trying to be the best dad I can possibly be and forge a future for my child. I can see the future that's unfolding. I don't want that future for my child or yours. So I'm also trying to run a busy home with many murder victims in it, people that are not going to see justice. I'm taking phone calls constantly from people like yourself who want to talk to me, and that's great. And I want to talk because I want to reach one more mind because it recruits someone to our banner. And I think we're all seeing that now. We're aware that people are slowly waking up and they're coming across. And this is why I can tell you now, Westminster is panicking. In the last 3 weeks, I've spoken to 2 different peers, lords, and I've given them evidence and testimony, and that's working its way to wherever they're in the ether. And I'm told by 2 of them, by reliable people, that Westminster is panicking. They're panicking because the truth is coming out. So I get loads of nurses reach out and doctors reach out to me. I don't get the time to take video testimony off. They'll collate it, edit it, and then present it. There's not enough hours in the day when you're trying to do everything, But I've been passing these medical professionals on with their consent to people like Andrew Bridgen, to a couple of lords that have been in touch and doing the best that I can do. I would love to not have to work at all and get videos of these 90 odd individual nurses, put them in one thing and then throw it out. What platform would I throw it out on? Because they won't allow it on YouTube. They won't allow it on Facebook. They ain't going to show it on the BBC. so it's very frustrating. But what I can tell you is these people know. They know. The doctors know. The nurses know. I've had doctors there doing cremation paperwork. When they come in, I can't resist pulling them. I have to, because I like seeing them squirm. And and also I think to remind myself that it actually really is happening. So I
Yeah.
say to this doctor, I say, so the last one was Dr. Potter. I said, so doctor, I said, have you seen more deaths in vaccine recipients? And they look at the floor and their face drops and they shuffle their feet and they say yes. And everybody knows. And by everyone, they mean all the doctors know.
Yeah. I don't know how they can live with themselves. I really don't.
Well, it's a tough thing, isn't it? But I mean, I've often wondered, why do people engage with me? What is it that they see in me that makes them want to? I think they know that I put my ass on the line, so clearly I'm someone that can be trusted.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't betray that trust. I mean, I've had a couple of hospice nurses reach out to me recently. One called Helen, the other one I think was Christine. And I would be betraying them by releasing their details to the public.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to try and inspire these people to have the courage to be open themselves and tell people themselves. Because I can tell you, if people had heard the testimony firsthand from hospice nurses that I've heard, it would be a game changer.
Yeah.
It would be a game changer. But I can't. They're so worried about their mortgage and their car payments and the 3 kids and their next shopping bill and their next electric bill. People, it breaks my heart because people think slavery, they talk about, oh, slavery was abolished 100 years ago. It's never stopped. This is a modern slavery system. We're all slaves. Do you know what? Your collar and your shackles are simply digital now. Look at your direct debits. They are your slave. And if you don't think you're a slave, do you know what? Don't get up in the morning then for work and see how long your lifestyle lasts. We're fed and we're watered and we live in a cube because we get up and we feed these bastards in Westminster and who are now cutting the grass. That's what they call it, is cutting the grass. So this cull is deemed, I can tell you now, it's deemed as distasteful. So the term they use is cutting the grass. They're cutting the grass. They look at us as grass.
Yeah. No, it's sick. It really is sick. It's unbelievable.
Well, it's only if we let it happen. And we haven't got to fight them. All we've got to do is turn our backs on them and say, do you know what? Fuck you, no, we're not doing it. And a key moment is going to be when the WHO take over, because they're going to usher them in. I tell you now, they will usher them in. It's a done deal. There was 100,000 on a petition. They just totally ignored it. It should be up for debate. It's not up for debate. They're going to bring them in. And when you look at this farcical COVID inquiry, what a joke. So what it's done is a couple of things. Every Muppet that's spoken on there has said how one of their biggest regrets is not locking down harder and sooner. So that's coming, right? And the other thing they've done is making sure that every politician looks incompetent and stupid. Now, look at what they got people doing. We were walking into restaurants with a mask on, but when you sit down, you're safe.
Yeah. I know.
Think about the lunacy.
Yeah.
How can people do that and actually go with it? I'm clearly wired very differently because I just said, do you know what? Fuck it, I'm not going out for a meal then. Yeah. This is why people are partying in Westminster, having a karaoke party, maskless, all dancing. So there never was any risk.
Yeah.
And still they're lining up for boosters that are, it beggars belief. And it's shown me, I think there's a number of reasons. One, I think, is the mind-bending thing they're citing them. But number 2 is it's easier to fool someone than it is to get them to admit they've been fooled.
Definitely.
How many people must be sitting there thinking, yeah, I know they made a mug of me now. But is that where you leave it then, as we're on the tip of the WHO coming in and taking over?
Yeah. I mean,
so I've kind of, I've resigned myself now to it getting really dystopian. It will. Yeah. And then will they see it? I really don't know.
When you think, though, John, that the ones that should be angry are the ones that were coerced into taking it. They should be 100%. The ones who are now really angry, got nothing to lose. They should be the ones going after the politicians, the doctors, and everyone that's done this. But that isn't happening. I don't know.
No.
Well,
it's interesting when I've talked to people who've said, yeah, we see it, and They're very placid about, and they're going, like, well, what difference can I make?
Yeah.
You know, never underestimate the difference that one man can make. Imagine, I mean, look at the difference that I've made and the awareness that I've raised.
Yeah.
Imagine 5 million of me.
Yeah.
I'm their worst nightmare.
Yeah.
Because
People.
if there was 5 million of me, we'd all be in London now. We would have overrun them. We would have overrun them, and we are. I am the people they don't want, and I suspect that's what we're going to see shortly. So what we live in is a problem solution
Yeah.
scenario at the moment. So you'll notice there's been a funeral director in Hull that's been highlighted recently, and they were saying about how they had to remove 34 deceased, and this funeral director had 3 branches and 2 people have been arrested. Let me tell you, as a funeral director who's worked in the trade for a long time, you know, and I know this story is not true. I know that it isn't what it's being portrayed to be, and there are real obvious pointers. Have a look at Company's House.
Yeah.
This particular Legacy Funerals in Hull, their books, I've had a look at the books that they've got, and 2017, 2018, they made like profit of 2 grand,
Yeah.
profit of 3 grand. Now, I can tell you, if you've got 3 branches of a funeral home, you're doing extremely well and you're earning a lot of money. A
Yeah.
lot of money. Their books don't correlate with a funeral director that's been trading for 13 years. I've been doing it for 8 years. I've got 1 branch. I've done tenfold what they've done.
Yeah.
You know, so that tells me that the whole thing is not a genuine story. It's a pretend fake story. Why are they doing that? Problem solution. So there's going to be a public outcry on the back of this. The public will demand for legislation, won't they? And regulation of funeral directors. And then what they're going to do is they're going to target people like me who've opened their gob.
Yeah.
I've been chucked out of the SAIF for bringing them into disrepute. The regulations will probably stipulate you have to be an SAIF member. They won't let me rejoin because I brought them into disrepute. So this whole story is just designed for anyone who speaks out. They'll shut them down. So I know what's coming. I'm not stupid, you know. But that was the price that I was willing to pay for you and your family, because I'm not going to be complicit in a lie. And this whole story about the funeral directors in Hull is complete fabrication. I looked at the books on Company's House. It's just the numbers are not even anywhere near what they should be. To give you an example, the average price of a funeral is between 3-4 grand, and they had 34 deceased. I think in 2022 their profit was 3 grand.
Makes
They
sense.
had 34 deceased on site that
Yeah.
were removed. It's just the whole story is full of holes. But unless you work in the industry to know what sort of numbers you should be putting on Company's House, they're just guessing, and it's so full of holes. It's unbelievable. But it's not about that funeral director in Hull. It's about nailing people like me and a few others that are speaking out. That's
Yeah.
what I predict will be.
Oh
So
yeah.
so on the back of it, there'll be regulation come in that you have to be a member of an overseeing body, and they won't let me join that body because I've spoken out about a record number of people dying after being jabbed, and I'll get closed down. That's what I predict. We'll see.
But what if all the funeral directors banded together and one of these, you know, authoritative unions that comes down and says you all need to do this? What would happen if all the funeral directors said, no, we're just going to carry
Well,
on? We don't
that
need.
could have happened from day one, because I can assure you the pattern that's here is not unique to me. I've spoken to loads of funeral directors; they'll see it, or the vast majority of them do. A little bit like members of the public, you're always going to get the ones with the conviction of a Japanese soldier. No, no, no. You know, despite people dying at ages but most of them do see it. I've had them speak to me and openly admit, what will they do when their arse is on the line? Now, if they haven't spoken out, I suspect they'll probably meet the regulations and they'll pass the inspection. But if they've spoken out, they won't pass the inspections. They won't meet the regulations, so they'll be closed down.
Yeah.
You know, and therein lies the problem. In the words of the guy who came and delivered a deceased to me from Dorset yesterday afternoon, he said they're all pulled their ladders up.
Yeah.
So they're just frightened. They know what's going on. And we've got what I would refer to as the trench mentality at the minute, where everyone is in the trench at the Somme and they're all looking at each other and the whistle's about to blow. They know what's going to happen and they're all waiting for someone else to go up first. And I'm that one who's run over the top first. And then they're looking to see who else will. Do you know? And I think once you get half a dozen or a dozen or so
Yeah.
that all say, yeah, fuck it, I'm seeing it as well, something's very, very wrong. And they do that and they make the effort that I've made to do it on enough platforms where people are hearing it. Unfortunately, I'm going to be the fall guy, I predict, but it is what it is. I don't care.
Yeah.
I feel sad for my wife and son because I know my life will probably become difficult. But why is my family any more important than everyone else's? People that are being poisoned and killed.
Yeah.
I just can't bring myself to ignore it. It doesn't matter what the consequences are to me personally. I've said it many times. Come and get me, but I'm not going to shut up. So I guess they'll look at other avenues they can do to get that to do that. Some people I know when they silence you, they rack up charges against you, or they'll find kiddie porn on your PC or financial irregularities. They find somewhere to nail you. So I kind of knew what the price for me would be. And I'm not a wealthy guy because I'm not that mercenary, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I won't be difficult. I don't suppose to ruin, but I can't live with it. I couldn't live with it. Do you know, I had about 6 weeks where I didn't say anything when I knew, and it felt terrible.
Yeah.
It felt terrible not wanting to jeopardize everything you've worked for, but knowing what was going on and feeling terrible about it, and I just can't. And I remember when I spoke out 3.5 years ago, mid 2020, probably I started shouting, and it was from a very lonely place, very lonely. I would never wish that loneliness upon anyone. It's awful. I've lost all my mates. Um, I've got one friend that I still knock about with, and I can't talk to him about it because he's been triple jabbed, and you know you don't want to know. And meanwhile I'm putting these murder victims in coffin every month. Not all of them, because there's a regular death rate, but I know many of them are, and yeah, it's been a tough 3.5 years, to be honest with you. But every death, it doesn't demoralize me. It makes my resolve stronger because I know I'm right.
Yeah.
And I guess moving forward, I don't think anything happens by chance. I think I've been put here on this earth at this time in the position I'm in because I'm a force of truth and light and honesty and goodness, and I care more about other people than I do me. Is
Yeah.
the reality. And I'm going to keep shouting about it until everyone sees it. And then hopefully I'll be on the right side of history and not just the nutty Undertaker who died suddenly from aggressive cancer or heart attack. That's the other thing. Is it gone are the days where they send people with silencers to nail you? It's car accident or cancer or sudden
Yeah.
heart attack now. I really don't care. I'm not frightened of death.
I guarantee
Yeah,
though,
it's not.
Tom, I
No, mate,
guarantee.
it's not the end. It's the beginning, mate. It's the beginning.
Yeah. But I guarantee if
It really
anything
is.
happened to you, there'd be a lot of people really looking at what happened. It's
To me, and that's the thing. I think ultimately, me talking keeps me safe, don't it? But I'm not frightened of death. What would death be for me? It would be the beginning, not the end.
oh yeah,
And I believe probably the way things have gone, hell is here on earth at the moment. Look at what people are doing to other people for money.
yeah,
It's disgusting. I've never put no money in a coffin. You can't take it with you. Why would you treat people? Why would you kill people's children?
yeah,
That mindset. They can fucking have this earth. It's not a place I would want to live on anyway. The way it
no,
is, if I can inspire people to band up and make a change, then that's great. And I feel very humbled to be part of that. But these people are insane. They've got no. Look at what they're doing in Gaza, for example. You
yeah,
know, that orchestrated attack. I mean, I've looked at the testimony of the IDF forces. You couldn't get a cigarette paper under the border there. It was so high tech. They abandoned their posts because they were ordered to.
yeah,
So that shows you. I'm not condoning what Hamas have done is wrong, and I'm told they're funded by Israel anyway. But that shows you how much Israel cares about Israelis.
yeah.
They
That's it.
don't. They don't. They don't. That's why I've had loads of people in the Jewish community, lovely people, rabbis, community leaders reach out to me here, and they all point the finger the same way.
Yeah,
That's why they're not living in Israel. That's why they're living in Europe, because they don't want to live under that tyranny. And my hope, I guess, is moving forward. I believe that fundamentally there's more good in this world than there is bad. Like in all things, you've got up and down, left and right, positive, negative. And the one thing I've learned over the last 3 years is there's a great evil running this earth, But where there's an evil, there must be an opposite force for good. And my hope is that that's in us. And there's
Yeah.
enough of us collectively to stop it. And you know, sometimes you just need someone to nudge you, don't you, to get you going. Go, you can do it. You can. And that's, I think, what I'm trying to do is inspire other people to want justice,
Yeah.
and to want what's good and right, and get rid of these bastards, these wicked bastards, and put people in with a moral compass. You know.
Yeah. But the trouble is with these wicked bastards and the agendas that are in place, they've got a lot of tools in the toolbox. And like you were
Oh, yeah.
saying with Israel at the moment, one of the tools in the toolbox is war. And that reason for war is to bring more money into the system.
Oh, of course, the military
Yeah.
complex.
And
Yeah,
we
you
know
even got to look at Richie Sunak. His father-in-law owns a good lump of a company called Infosys, who have
yeah,
just been granted gas and oil licenses in the north of Gaza, $1.7 billion. You know, I've seen the plans for a canal to rival the Suez Canal. It terminates in the north of Gaza. They're going to
yeah,
build a big luxury compound around it called Nova City.
yeah.
So they're busy clearing it and killing these people, all on the back of this fake attack, orchestrated by Israel. It's you just kind of despair, but it's one of those things you either see it or you don't. And if you don't see it, are you ever
But
going to? I really don't
we
know.
also we also do a lot of interviews with a lot of very, very important financial people within the industry. And basically, probably within the next 12 months, we're going to see a crash that's going to eclipse anything that we've ever seen in the world. So
Mm.
all these people who have taken the money and the benefits for what they have done over the past few
It's going to be
years,
worthless. It's
the
going to be
money's the
worthless.
money is
Yeah.
not going to benefit them. They're
Uh,
going to be the
it,
ones
it,
suffering.
it's fiat currency. It's worthless anyway. And I
Yeah.
can tell you, one of the things that I've learned is when you hear about the biblical term Alpha and Omega, there really is an Alpha and Omega in the financial system. And at the bottom, where Omega, that is where the Rothschilds are. And they've lost access to that. They haven't got it.
Yeah.
They're skint. They've got no money. So they're not paying anyone. And they're panicking now because people are only doing these things for money.
Yeah.
You know, it's all going to come crashing down soon. And my hope is that I live to see it. But if I don't, I still feel very humbled to have been a very small cog in a big machine that brings these bastards down, because I still don't think they're going to win.
No, no.
I can't. You know, I think they've overreached. I think they've been doing this for a long time, trimming back, cutting the grass for a long time, but they've overstretched themselves with this. There are a number of people that I obviously speak to, a lot of people. One group of people suspect there might be a Carrington event coming.
Yeah.
A Carrington event, for those of you who are not aware, is a pole shift. They suggest that that could be imminent and that could be catastrophic. And the idea behind the cull, the cutting of the grass, is these people don't want to compete with any survivors for the resources that remain after the Carrington event, and
Yeah.
that's why they're trying so hard to get rid of us. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's true or
Well,
not.
the, the
I'm an
Carrington,
undertaker, you
yeah,
know.
the Carrington event was pre 1900, where electricity was in its infancy, and it was a solar flare that came off the
Yes,
sun. It hit
yeah,
Canada and the top of North America, absolutely decimated the infrastructure. Now, if you
yeah,
can imagine, we have something in the form of either an EMP from a nuclear weapon being blown up in high atmospheric conditions, or we're well overdue a massive solar flare from the sun.
yeah,
The infrastructure that we have today, the vehicles, the computers, everything where money is held would be destroyed overnight. We'd be
yeah.
back into the Stone Age, and
Exactly. The
left for
famine.
anyone. Yeah,
Famine is the one, because everything is computer controlled now. So the feeling is with these very intelligent, and I've never wished anyone would be wrong more than them, but they say it's coming, and that's their gut feeling. In fact, I
yeah,
looked at a paper only yesterday and skimmed over it, and I shuddered reading it, and it was from 2015. Um, that would explain, because one of the questions is, once you understand what's happening, is you wonder why. You know, why is it that these people are Satanists? Is it that there's a few globalist ideology nutcases, or is there some other reason? And if there was a Carrington event, and if it did destroy most of the Earth, and the resources that remained were limited,
yeah,
then yes, that would make sense. So I really don't know. The
yeah,
reality is, I'm an undertaker, I guess, that sees government-sponsored murders. That, but inevitably, when you put your ass on the line and people know they can trust you, a lot of people reach out and they furnish you with information that you wouldn't otherwise know. And I've spoken to people that I never dreamed I would speak to, people, very influential people, lords and peers and politicians, police and military and doctors and nurses and more harrowingly victims, and it's I was never deeply religious, but I think of Ecclesiastes 1:18, with knowledge comes sorrow, and with greater knowledge comes a greater sorrow. It's really true. Do you know what? I feel like having it written across my back because I carry it like a cross. It's
Yeah,
awful. It is what it is.
it is. Anyway, sir, I think this has been incredible. People are going to get a lot out of this. Is there anything you want to leave us with before we finish today?
I would just say I'm remain convinced that the Great Reset is going to end up morphing into the Great Awakening, much
Yeah,
like a chrysalis going into a butterfly. So don't despair.
yeah,
Know that there's going to be a lot of upheaval coming. People are going to say, "How did you see it?" And I will say, "How did you not?" You know, it's going to happen whether you want it to or not. I would say prepare and try and be kind to each other, and know that in the coming days, moving forward, we're going to build a different future for our kids, a future where they can have a future where they're not poisoned, and we get back to some sort of community, local communities, and network locally. And I, I think it'll get very dark before we clamour for the light, but it will come. So don't
absolutely.
despair, because you're not alone, guys. I'm with you.
Thank you very much again for coming on to talk to us. As we always say here, you should always believe nothing and question everything. And
100%.
thanks once again, John. It's been great talking to you, and we'll keep in touch. And hopefully, we'll see the change. And the next conversation we have in the future is about positive things coming through for everyone.
I can tell you now, I've already seen victory. It is coming. I've seen it. It comes at great cost, but it does come.
And as long as we're prepared to fight for this, we
Yeah,
will
we
get
will.
there.
We will.
Yeah.
We will. I've already seen it. I've already seen it. It's going to come. It's going to come at great cost. So don't despair. Just stay strong. Keep being kind to each other and hold on.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John, and we'll speak to you soon. Take care.
Take care.